Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show in which we discuss all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today we have a brand new deck for you, but before that, just a quick reminder to please click like and subscribe if you enjoyed my videos. We're well on our way to 1 million subscribers and every single click counts. And today's deck is going to be centered around Miss Bumbleflower, and we're going to be upgrading the peace offering Precon. Now, if you don't know what Miss Bumbleflower does, for 1 colorless, 1 green, 1 white, and 1 blue, she's a legendary creature, rabbit, citizen, 1/5 with vigilance, and whenever you cast a spell, target opponent draws a card. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It gains flying until end of turn. If this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, you draw 2 cards. So first off, let me say it's good to be back. It's been almost 2 months since I've made any long form videos, and that's been for a couple of reasons. The first one is that I broke my wrist, so editing videos was basically impossible, but then also I've been back home visiting family and on vacation for summer, but now I'm fully energized and ready to get back into MTG, and particularly since I'm super excited for Duskmourn. In any case, Miss Bumbleflower stuck out to me immediately because of one fact, and that is that she commits crimes over and over, which is very weird flavorfully, but it is a very good angle for us to take advantage of mechanically. The fact that you're going to gift an opponent a card every time you cast a spell means that you can trigger your crime effects basically every turn, guaranteed. That means that any card that has that kind of trigger is going to be very strong in this deck. So I wanted to move a little bit away from the group hug aspect of the deck and make it more towards a normal deck, taking advantage of the evasion we get with flying and the counters and card draw that Miss Bumbleflower is going to be providing. So the way we're going to do this is first I'm going to list all the cards that I removed from the deck and give you a reason why, and then I'm going to tell you what cards I added. In total, we've removed 18 cards and added 18 new cards, so without further ado, let's get started. So starting out with the first card we removed is Bloodroot Apothecary. Now this card has seen a lot of hype. I personally don't see it. I don't think it's a very good card at all in general, but specifically in this deck, it doesn't really have any synergy. We're not doing anything with poison counters, so it can go. Bed Steward of Argive is more of a group hug card, and since we're not going to be playing group hug after all, we're going to be removing this. Jolly Gerbils is another card that's sadly going to be cut. I love the art on this. It's absolutely adorable, but unfortunately it only works with the gift mechanic, and we've cut quite a few of the gift cards in the deck, which means that this isn't going to be that great. Sporefrog is a card that I think is very good if you have a decent way to recur it. Unfortunately, this deck isn't really doing anything like that, so it's just an onboard fog, which isn't really that great. Steelbird Champion is a card that I think could have been very good if it triggered on every spell and not just non-creatures, but as it is, getting a 1/1 for 3 mana that is only going to grow bigger when your opponents cast non-creature spells is just too far below rate. Secret Rendezvous is just not a very good card in general in Commander, and since we're removing a lot of group hug cards, this was an easy one to cut. Broken Wings is versatile, but it's not really what I want to be doing for 3 mana in my Commander games. Long River's Pull is fine, but as you'll see, we've added a better counterspell and one that doesn't involve us having to give an opponent a card just to counter something. Perplexing Test is aptly named because I'm really perplexed as to why it was in this deck in the first place. It's only really good if you're running a tokens deck or specifically against a tokens deck, but even in both of those scenarios, it can often not end up being a one-sided board wipe, and it can often be really awkward if more than one player has tokens in play, and it's just not that good. We're not really running a token sub-theme in this, so it's got to go. We're also going to be cutting Mangara the Diplomat. Now this is a card that has just never impressed me that much. It's supposed to be a kind of political group hug card, but I feel like if people are going to attack you, they're going to attack you anyway, and often they're going to do it with a bunch of creatures, so you're maybe only going to draw a card or 2 off of this. The other part is better for sure, the one that lets you draw cards when your opponents play 2 spells per turn, but in general I feel like it just doesn't do enough for 4 mana. Riot Control is a decent card, but we had a ton of fogs in the deck, and I really don't think we need that many in the new angle that we're going to be running, so this was again a pretty safe cut. Martial Impetus I like, but it's a very group huggy kind of card, and auras are generally not that great in Commander anyway. I do like these goated cards in general, but we had so many other better cards to add to the deck that I just cut this. Rites of Flourishing and Girapur Orrery are both very similar cards in that they give our opponents advantages before they give us the advantages normally. That's not really where you want to be with most of these cards, and the deck isn't really built to take advantage of the symmetry, so it just ends up being you giving your opponent free resources. I feel these are doing more harm than good. Realm Cloaked Giant and Cast Off is another weird inclusion. I mean, it's a decent board wipe, I suppose, but there's just so many better things you can do that are also budget that I feel pretty comfortable cutting that. Cultivate I I've cut because it's a 3-mana ramp spell in a deck where our commander costs 4. We want to maximize our ability to play our commander as soon as possible, so I've taken this out and added some 2-mana ramp spells instead. Tempt with bunnies isn't really doing that much with the deck. Even if our opponents take advantage of the tempting offer, the 1/1s are just kind of random, and this isn't a deck that's going to struggle with card draw, so it felt like this wasn't really doing enough. Tempt with discovery was a slightly harder cut. This is where we're starting to get to cards that are a bit better, and it feels less good cutting them. However, we needed space, and there's still better options in the deck. Finally, Tenuous Truce is another card that I could see myself not cutting if I had a little bit more space, because it can be useful and it's a fun card. But again, since we're doubling down on losing most of the group hug aspects, then this is a card that can safely go. Now we're going to look at cards that we added, and here's where we have more to talk about. We're starting off with Hard Bristle Bandit. So this is really good ramp in this deck, and it synergizes so well with our commander. First off, it's going to tap for any color. That's obviously good. But then once we have our commander out, it's going to make it extremely easy for us to trigger our commander twice, thus getting to draw 2 cards, because the first time we cast a spell with our commander, we're going to commit a crime and thus untap Hard Bristle Bandit. That basically makes Hard Bristle Bandit a mana dork that taps for 2 mana, and that's really, really solid. Nimble Brigand is another really good card in the deck. We can obviously put counters on it and give it flying with our commander, which is really nice, but seeing as we're going to be committing a crime every turn, this is just an unblockable source of card draw. Omen Port Vigilante really works well with our commander, because once we have her out, all we need to do is cast a spell. We get to put a counter on Omen Port Vigilante, and it's going to get flying and double strike. That's a lot of damage, and in a couple of turns, this can be swinging for 10, 15, 20 damage. It's really, really powerful. Edric's Spymaster of Trest is a much better political card than some of the other ones we had in the deck earlier. It's going to really discourage our opponents from attacking us, and they're also usually not going to want to remove this. Not only that, but with all of the evasion that we're going to get thanks to our commander, this is going to draw us a lot of cards. We're going to add Free Strider Lookout to the deck. Now, this card is really, really good considering we have the crime sub-theme going on. It basically is going to equate to a ramp per turn unless we get really, really unlucky, and it's going to ramp into non-basics as well, which is incredibly powerful. Oko the Ringleader fits so nicely in this deck because we have a lot of creatures that we can copy, and since it copies whatever the creature is at that point, it's going to copy the flying that's granted by our commander, which means that it can often get evasion. Not only that, but we're always going to have the crime ability turned on, which means that his +1 is draw 2, discard 1, which is very good. Tulane Teller of Tales is just a generic good stuff card, but it's going to work very nicely by giving us extra mana, and we have a bunch of creatures we want to play. Rufix God of Horizons works very well in the deck. We have a lot of cards that want us to have no maximum hand size, and we're drawing a lot of cards, so that's very good. And the fact that we can bank mana to use for later is also a solid ability. Shardless Agent works really well in this deck, and so do all Cascade and Discover cards for that matter, so that might be a direction you want to go with this commander, seeing as they're basically going to guarantee that you cast 2 spells per turn if you hit something. Shardless is almost certainly going to hit into ramp or removal, which we're pretty happy with. Cold-Eyed Selkie is unbelievably good in this deck. It's normally already pretty difficult to block, but then you can also just put counters on it with your commander and give it flying. That's just going to draw so many cards. Toothy Imaginary Friend works very nicely. We're drawing a lot of cards, so this is going to get bigger and bigger, and then when it dies into more cards. Here, Imaginative Rascal works very nicely with what our commander is doing by giving us extra counters. On the Trail is an absolute must include in this deck. We're going to be able to ramp every single turn, and that's going to get us very far ahead very quickly. Teferi Temporal Pilgrim works very nicely in any deck that's drawing a bunch of cards. He can get a lot of counters on himself very easily, but also crucially, the 2/2 that he makes gets really big, and it can be given flying by our commander. The Eternal Wanderer is there instead of Realm Cloak Giant. The -4 is just too good to pass up on, particularly when we can keep our commander in play that also has Vigilance. Cyclonic Rift is there instead of Perplexing Test. Obviously, this is a very expensive card, and you can substitute it for any other board wipe. It doesn't have to be one-sided. This is just the best of the bunch. Reverse the Polarity is a great counterspell that I recommend including in lots of decks. The first mode that counters all spells is getting more relevant day by day as new mechanics are printed, and the fact that you can just randomly win the game out of nowhere with the third mode is not to be discounted. Finally, Nature's Law and Rampant Growth were added to the deck so that we can ramp into our commander as soon as possible, which is really what the deck wants to be doing, getting her out on turn 3. So there you have it. That has been my upgrade for the Peace Offering Precon. I think it's a really sweet Precon if you go in the group hug route, but if you want to try something a little bit different, I recommend giving my version a spin. It works very nicely. You could also build it more heavy on counters, more heavy on creatures that want to deal combat damage, or more heavy on stuff like Cascade. There's really so many directions that you can go with this deck, and it's always going to be very strong. But what do you think? Are there any cards that you wouldn't have removed? Any cards that you would have added? Let me know in the comment section below. I always make sure to read all of your comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like or subscribe. It really helps the channel. channel. And until next time, take care.